I used to think if I had a good idea, I could chase it.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of myself. And then I realized, okay, if you create something that relies on your revelation alone, then it's yours to sustain. And
it's all about you.
That is exhausting. And if you give someone else something else, like I had companies I was giving equity away. If you give someone else something you created with a revelation they don't carry, you've actually straddled them with a burden that they don't know how to carry, and they'll hurt themselves.
Welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and transform the world. I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, and today I have a former neighbor, Dan Ferriera, and he's a business guy. He's an entrepreneur. I'm reading some of this because I know you, but I want to make sure I get it right. You and your wife own several businesses right now, including us, Offsite, and it's a company that makes factory-constructed houses and multi-unit developers, right? You're multi-unit developers.
Correct.
And this is like a really unique business. This is like a first of its kind of. And to tell us exactly what makes this building business unique.
Yeah. US Offsite. Us Offsite sounds cool too.
Did I say
off? Yeah. That's a US Offsite.
US Offsite.
So really what we're doing here is 20 years ago, I got into the building industry, and my whole thing was, let's make it better. And about 15 years ago, I felt like we hit a limit. So I thought, how can we make it better? Where are the pain points? And so what we do is we take buildings of any kind up to 5 stories, built out of wood. You know, it's things you would experience every day: apartment complexes, single family residence, but mainly denser and things are where we shine. And we reverse engineer it. So we take that, we break it into sections, and we make the sections in a assembly line inside of a factory, and then we ship those back, and then we assemble them like Legos. So the best analogy is, if you want to buy a car, you don't ship all the parts to your garage and assemble it there, unless you're awesome and you're a great car guy. You go get it from a factory. Yes. And so if the building industry could harness the same thinking, then we could see cost benefit to the consumer. We could see efficiency, we could see quality of job creation, all the things that you get when you bring that kind of thing to bear. So yeah, anywhere 1,000 miles now we can build, Seattle to San Diego.
Well, so you would say like you're the Henry Ford of
I wouldn't say that.
Of the
and to give credit,
building and commercial industry.
I would say, one of the things I tell our team is, let's stay humble and sometimes it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. Exactly. No one remembers Alta Vista. Yeah. So there are other people who have done this before me, and there are other people doing it now. Some of them are doing it well. Some of them are doing it differently than we are, but it has been around. I mean, mainly what you have is people who, there's kind of 2 different players coming towards this space. There's people who used to build mobile homes, and then they built man camps for the oil fields. Then they built, Marriott Hotel approached them about 20 years ago and said, can you build a Marriott with this technology? And you can. So it kind of started with really specific, if you've ever built a Marriott, they have a spec book. Yeah. They know everything. So they're like, can you build this? And now where we are is we kind of are more creative with the technology, where we can build a lot of things.
Is this different than like modular homes? Because modular homes have been around forever, right?
Yeah. So what people don't realize is you have a lot of things going on in the building world. You have what we call California code compliant construction, which everyone's used to seeing.
Yes.
Stick built, site built, slow. And then you have something called the HUD code, which is a federal thing where you see mobile homes and things like that. And so what we're doing is we're taking the technology that you've seen in maybe in a mobile home, and we're advancing it forward, higher quality construction, so that it meets your normal building codes.
Got it.
And then we're able to do that all the way to 5 stories.
Wow.
So so you could say it's built on an assembly line like a mobile home.
Yes.
But we're building it to such a high degree of specification and quality that we can now go build your 5-story apartment complex, hotel, anything like that.
Wow. Okay, what inspired you to do it in Reading? Because we all know that Reading, as far as like shipping, well, you were on Highway 5, so that's kind of nice.
Good. Yeah, I mean,
But,
you can make an argument for it after. Yeah,
Shasta County is not, it's not San Jose, it's not LA, it's not San Francisco, and why here?
Well, the impetus of it would be my wife, like most good things.
I know that 49 years, baby, right here, following my wife.
So we're sitting down in San Luis Obispo, where we used to live for 15 years.
That's a beautiful place to be.
Let's not talk about it.
Okay.
It is beautiful. We still have 4 businesses there, supply chain, building companies. We manufacture a steel door and window, which is one of the nicest door windows in the world. We ship it all over the world.
Whoa.
So we have those companies, and that's a whole nother story of how those got started. Amazing, beautiful companies. And, 15 years of being poor and grinding away, we finally kind of had a house surrounded by horses off the ocean and starting to get good.
Yeah.
And then my wife goes, I think we need to really think about where we're raising our children.
Oof.
And I went, and so we actually
like Texas.
Yeah, there was all those thoughts, right? I said, well, we're not those people, honey. We've made it. We put 20 years in. Everybody bailed. We stayed on the coast where it's expensive. We made really hard choices to give a quality of life to our family.
So that your wife could stay home.
My wife could stay home, and it was very basic for a long time, the way we had to live to build the businesses, it kind of finally turned, and things were happening, and anyways, so she actually said, I feel like, maybe we're supposed to go up to far northern California. We're from San Diego, so.
And that's a beautiful place.
We're like, why or would we ever?
I always told God, if you ever wanted to call me to San Diego, I would suffer for that.
Yeah. So I thought we'd go back south. She said north. So we actually passed through this area for the first time to see some family. And like a lot of people, had a pretty incredible encounter experience with it's always hard because you're like, was that the Lord? Was that just me taking a few days off work? What was that? And so my wife said, I think we're supposed to be in Reading, be around the Bethel environment, and that's supposed to be part of our life.
The Bethel environment.
Yeah.
Note that.
Yeah,
Bethel
note
environment.
That. So I said, honey, we're not those people. I said,
I think you should have had your wife on this interview.
Yeah, I told her, I said, well, look, we made a lot of friends and family who have taken some time off and received a lot from that environment. But I said, I don't float. I do. And if I go up there, I need something to do. And she said, okay, well, you figure that part out. So I actually started driving here once a month from San Luis Obispo.
Man.
I said, if we're really going to relocate my family, I'm going to put myself through some pain and figure out if this is it. So I drove here about 15 times. That was like when the car fire was happening.
Yeah.
And
that was motivating to live here during the car fire.
Yeah, I drove here that week and drove back a couple weeks later, and it was really good for me to go put myself in the more uncomfortable moments and say, what is reality?
Yeah, what's the worst going to be in Reading, for sure.
So we were up here, and I would come up and I would work on a real estate development deal that was part of a plan to build a modular factory. So I'd been okay, let me back up here. I came to visit, and I called my cousin who was here doing school, and I said, hey, I came to a Heaven in Business conference one time. I met Andy Mason.
Andy Mason.
Do you think Andy would hang out with me? And he goes, no, we're not. You can't just call up leaders here and hang out with them. So I called up Andy and he said, come on down. So I went to his office and I walked in, and he said, so what are you up to? And I have 4 companies that are all doing all these things. And I've never said aloud to anybody that I'm thinking about prefabricating construction. He says, what are you up to? Just the normal. And I said, I'm going to build prefabricated housing for the West Coast of the United States. And he goes, and I looked at him and said, I'm not doing that. I've never thought about that. I've never even like voiced that. And he goes,
so you've never thought about that before?
I'd never said those words.
You shared to Andy something that what came out of your mouth, you had not.
I never premeditated, and I definitely wasn't really thinking about it. It was like one of the 50 little ideas, but nothing that I was active.
Yeah.
I should have answered that question 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who would overstate what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so he goes, oh, that's interesting. And I said, yeah, it is interesting that I said that. And then he went and introduced me to some people who had been talking about the same subject, and one thing led to another. And then all of a sudden I was negotiating for 72 acres in Anderson to build a 6-acre building. And I could go on and on. That land had never been for sale ever. It was owned by
the land you bought.
The land had never been sold. It was off market. Someone I met said, "Hey, let me call up." It was the Roseburg Corporation, $1 billion corporation. I called the Roseburg CFO, had his cell phone given to me from another friend. And he said, "No, we're not selling it." And I said, "Well, let me tell you what I want to do with it." And I told him, he said, "Okay, I'll sell it to you."
Wow.
And then found out that the land in Anderson, it's in an opportunity zone, which is interesting.
We are the land of opportunity. You probably didn't know that, Dan, when you came here. This is the promised land.
So
you read the Bible?
One time.
Promised land.
The promised land.
This is the promise. This is Moses brought us here.
We're going for 11 days, not 40 years. Okay. We're going to make it.
You're going to make it. Exactly.
So your question was, how do we get here? And I would say divine inspiration, step by step. But in hindsight, I look kind of smart sometimes, because it makes sense now.
Yeah. When you retell the story, you look like a genius, but when you're doing it, you look like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And then people are like, "He's so smart." And you're like, yeah, that was like Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So what's it look like to come up with new ideas and solutions? Like, we're in business for a long time too. So people want to get in business. I'm going to make a lot of money. And they have our story, right? They have 15 years of the grind. They have Elon Musk sleeping on the factory floor, right? This is how you start, right? This is it.
And the good news is every time you do it a little better.
Yeah.
Well, one, you start with more resources.
Exactly.
So that's helpful and more wisdom.
Yeah.
But I would, the wisdom thing that I'm walking in now that I'm working out is, I used to think if I had a great idea, I should act on it. And that was when I was naive of the work. Yeah. Then I did it and the work hurt and it took 5 years and whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm still okay with the pain because I'm kind of funky like that. And so I thought, okay, I have another good idea. I'm willing to go through the pain. I didn't check with my wife. Usually one of the reasons I can go super hard is because my home life is so dialed. I mean, most of my friends have had to back off at some point in their life because you got to take care of home. So if your home is strong, I mean, it just changes your capacity.
It does.
So I used to think if I had a good idea, I could chase it.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of myself. And then I realized, okay, if you create something that relies on your revelation alone, then it's yours to sustain. And
it's all about you.
That is exhausting. And if you give someone else something else, like I had companies I was giving equity away. If you give someone else something you created with a revelation they don't carry, you've actually straddled them with a burden that they don't know how to carry, and they'll hurt themselves. So I experienced that a couple of times, thinking I was giving people the opportunity of a lifetime. What I was really doing was putting a burden on them that they weren't set up to carry, and cause some issue. And then the latest thing the Lord's been revealing is the true wisdom of like innovation is, can you take a revelation and can you engineer a system, a structure that empowers people to walk in that revelation without having to know everything about it?
Yeah.
So my guy can come to work in the factory right now. He gets stability for his family. He gets security. He gets a future. He gets to innovate, but he didn't have to learn every piece of what got me there.
Does a piece of it.
He gets to walk into that piece that he's ready for.
This is a little bit of the assembly line kind of thinking, right? Where I'm an expert, but in one area.
Yeah. And he doesn't have to know about development, architecture, all these other things. He can just do that piece.
But he's the best of the best at the piece he plays.
Yep. And I can offer him a vertical movement where he can grow from there to there to there to there. So I can lead him into the full opportunity that this environment we've created offers without straddling him with the whole responsibility up front.
He can grow into it.
That's right. And so that's kind of been the latest thing, is like, how do you take these God revelations about innovation and make them accessible for people?
It's so good.
So they don't have to die with you the whole time. Like, that's not theirs.
Yeah. And when before we started this interview, we were just having a conversation about the fact that you created 4 businesses that basically you were the hub, and they ran, and basically if you left for any length of time, the business pretty much failed. And now you've come back as an older, wiser man with a lot of experience, and said, I don't want my business, like I don't want to be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
I want to teach and empower other people so that the business runs itself, and not all lines lead to me.
Right.
Talk about that, because that was a really interesting part.
Yeah.
And that's pretty innovative in itself, because first of all, a lot of people want to be the hero.
Right.
It makes it it strokes your ego, but it becomes a prison when you get big enough, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I tell my team, my core team, is and my kids now, I say, if the zeros on the check move you emotionally, then you become captive to that. So for instance, if you like to create chaos so you can solve a problem, then you've got your future. There you go. You just created it.
You just said something powerful right there. A lot of people create chaos, maybe not necessarily consciously, because that helps them to be the hero.
That's right. Or they don't, or, if I actually, if I'm willing, am I willing to do the hard things that actually empower other people, or would I rather do the easy things where I get that nice accolade feedback, And so, most of what I do in the company here in Redding is really not public at all, and on purpose, because if I can do that, then I can sneak off to Maui and work with FEMA for 2 weeks directly to solve a $200 million problem. And I'm not worried about operations at all, because I'm not involved,
so
So the team, the cool thing is the team I assembled now, I said, they basically recognize my role, and they said, get out of here. Don't, not get out of here physically, but we don't want you to have to be in the middle. So everything we're doing, and I'm challenging them to do the same thing with their teams,
So you end up with everybody's an owner.
Everybody's a leader.
Yeah. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
Bethel's actually going through that same process as Bill and I get older.
Yeah.
And there's so much of the ministry that is built on us. And it feels like, it strokes your ego, but it's also a prison.
Yes.
And it's not legacy. You can't.
And if you have a rock star walk into that environment, they'll leave eventually.
Exactly.
Because they'll just hit a ceiling, right?
Exactly. And that ceiling is called Kris and Bill.
Yeah. And it's reality.
But if you create an empowering culture like you're creating, there's a place for these people to go, and they learn to lead together and take ownership of the piece that's theirs. That's powerful.
Well, and if people pleasing isn't the measure of success, then you have to redefine what it is. And so now I'm looking at a team, and we have to say, what are our core values that we're willing to celebrate, and what are we not going to celebrate, and realigning all the focus around that, rather than any individuals. You don't want that siloing in those games and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to get rid of all that. But yeah, these companies I built, they were all healthy in their own way.
Yeah.
So then here's a funny story. The construction company I had, that was the first thing I built, we were running about $10 million a year, maybe $15 million a year, and doing high-end customs and commercial and stuff like that. And we had project management, we had supervisors, we had our own self-performing teams, a lot of things that I had seen modeled, I'd recreated. And then I was kind of the business development personality that kind of was the glue, and the people hugger and all that, And I enjoyed my role. And then right before I came to Redding, I said, Lord, I'm not going to be doing business development here full time. Like, how are we going to do this? So we landed a $30 million housing authority project with an entity we had served doing small projects for a long time. So we ended up winning a competitive bid for $30 million.
Here or in San Diego?
In San Luis Obispo for 2 years.
Got it.
So I went to my team. I just tripled the size of the company. I'm leaving town. You're welcome. And they all went, what's going on? So I come up here, and I've just given them a 2-year run of like doubling the size of the company. And then COVID happened. So I was going down
during the project.
So it's a 2-year project.
Glory to God in the highest.
Yeah. So we're in a liberal town with COVID.
Oh yeah.
So I have the city telling me you can't work.
Lockdown.
The same entity who I'm in a contract with saying, if you don't finish, you owe us these liquidated damages. And all the work I'm doing is Section 8 housing, where I have to move all the tenants out, do $1 million of remodel, and then put them all back in 30 days, and do that every month for 2 years. And so these are high touch clients that have a lot of concerns.
Yeah.
And it's COVID. And so it was a nightmare.
How'd you obviously survived.
I'm here.
Yeah.
$3 million, a little lighter.
You mean you lost some money?
I lost some money. Yeah. And so, but we finished the project.
And made a whole bunch of people mad, probably.
In
those days.
In hindsight, they all celebrated it as a win, but during it was very tough.
Yeah.
I'm having to look I
know it well.
Workers in the eyes and saying, you're going to be okay. Yeah. Keep going. And then at the same time, go fight, to get the right to work.
Yeah.
and also convincing my team if we don't work, we're going to die. Like, like we won't have a company.
Like we are essential services.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So obviously you could all imagine. And then at the same time as that's happening,
I have a bad imagination right now. I know it too well.
So, and then a year into that, my son got diagnosed with bone cancer, my 12-year-old. So I had to move to Children's Hospital for a year and live with him there while all that was going on.
Yeah, he had it in his arm or something.
Yeah,
right?
in his shoulder.
In his shoulder, yeah. And
So,
the end of that story is he's recovered well.
He's not only has he recovered well, they don't even know what to do. Like, we asked for advice and they're like, you're so far above our statistics of success. We don't know what to tell you to do better.
I remember talking to you way early on, and I think the prognosis was possibly he wasn't going to live, right? Is that true?
Yes. It's funny. They don't say a lot to you during, it's really a funky experience because they're really hesitant to say much.
Yeah.
So you do your own research.
Yeah.
And you come up with conclusions and not conclusions. You have to go process what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you have to make a decision, my wife, Kris, and I, that we don't accept any of this information.
Yeah. This prognosis is not his.
But you do have to understand what's about to happen. Like you need to understand, because you're now in an ecosystem, which is the state. You're in the insurance and the state and the hospital and it's in the university. It's a very bizarre thing. You're thankful for it, but
and he was when he got diagnosed, he was like 13 or 14, right? 12. Yeah. I remember he wasn't little. He
was going to Bethel Christian School. Yeah. One of the main reasons we came was to get our kids in that environment. He's playing on the soccer team. So we just thought he had a sports injury because he was waking up in pain. And then we finally figured some things out, and it was very bad, very quick. But we texted a few friends and said, hey, we're going to drop the kids off at school tomorrow. Because once an orthopedic person locally saw what was going on, they said, pack your bags, get ready for a phone call. You're going to go to UCSF in the next 48 hours. Oof. Or Stanford, whichever one I can get to take you.
Oh, that had to be devastating.
So we got a call, and it was time to go down the next day. And so actually, I think we'd already gotten a diagnosis. So we had come home for a few days waiting to start.
I was texting you when you were in the hospital, I remember.
All I know is we texted two friends. We'd been in town for a year. We texted two friends at BCS, at Bethel Christian, and said, hey, we're going to drop the kids off at school. They're going home with other families. And my wife and I are going to go to the hospital for a few days to start this. Would you pray with us before school? We got there. The entire school was there.
Wow.
2-hour prayer and worship.
Wow.
We canceled school for 2 hours and just had that.
Wow.
And then we went. So the whole journey of this horrible
place in the world to be.
Yeah. People are like, why didn't you move to San Francisco full time? Because that's what they tell you to do. I was like, no way.
Wow.
No way.
So you were out of your business for a year, or just working from the hospital, basically.
Yeah. Living in the hospital.
Doing what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to be devastating. How did you get through that? Plus you got 4 businesses, and the stress of that is enough to
4 other kids.
4 other kids.
And a marriage they tell you 75% of your marriages end during pediatric cancer, whether they live or die.
Yeah. People just trying to avoid the pain, right?
Yeah. So
did it affect your marriage negatively? Was it
no,
hard?
No. I mean, the fact that we would be gone for 2 weeks, home for a few days, for 2 weeks. And then the way we did it was I basically lived with him, and my wife stayed in Reading with our kids. And that was the best way we could figure it out. So I think the hard thing for Kristen was she wasn't there for some really hard moments. So that's hard on a mom to not be there.
Yeah.
And, my dad's a marriage and family counselor.
So you called him every other day?
Actually, we got close, which we hadn't been close. So that was interesting. That was
you and your dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually asked him, he took a few calls with my son, and we took our son to some counselors, and I said, hey, surely there's some trauma. The guy was on 2 life flights. He almost died. There's some really dicey moments. Yeah. And my dad just met with him and said, actually, Dan, what's interesting is your son, his name's Elijah. He said, he doesn't have any trauma because you covered him as a father, when you cover someone, he said he never felt alone or vulnerable the entire time. So he doesn't have any memories of it being like it was.
You're the one.
That's what he said.
You're the one who needs counseling.
You're going to need some help.
Unfortunately, Dan, you're the one that needs some counseling.
And that was probably the best thing I could hear.
Wow. It's amazing when, we're talking about obviously business and entrepreneurship, but we're talking about life, right? We're talking about life, and people see someone like you and they're like, okay, he's wealthy, he's successful, he has a wonderful marriage, and you almost become untouchable. You almost be like, well, like he's living a Photoshop life, and if he had problems, he wouldn't be as successful, and I've been given a tougher life. And it's like, wait, I love what Jesus said. He said, in the world you have tribulation. Like you can't make enough money or have a nice enough marriage or have good enough kids or a nice enough church to avoid in the world you have tribulation.
Yes.
And how you walk through it. But what's beautiful here is that, one of the reasons I think marriages break up is because the pain of walking through something gets so intense. And we've been through it with our daughter who had grand mal seizures for a year. The same, she wasn't dying, but she couldn't function. And I think those things, they either bond you or break you. Mm-hmm. And I think the difference in my mind, at least in our experience, is you either run to the pain or you try to find some way to isolate yourself from the pain, which is ultimately it leads to a broken marriage because that bonds you or breaks you.
I think I knew going into that, I already had a tendency to shut down emotionally because I'm a man.
Exactly.
It's
called male species.
And what I knew growing up and what I saw and, just my own defense mechanism. So I kind of knew going in, and I said to the Lord, I said, hey, if we go bankrupt and I come home with a son, I will take him over everything. And then once that, it kind of happened, kind of didn't happen as far as the financial losses, but,
you lost like $3 million.
$3 million. And honestly, we ended up having to borrow that from the government.
Yeah.
So I still have a monthly reminder for the next 20 years.
Yeah, was that you chose your son.
Yeah. And I think it's what it's become. It doesn't feel like a weight right now. It feels like a testimony.
Yeah.
Of I don't want to say we're going to, I am anticipating great provision with the promises that we're walking in, but I also see that, I've gone through a few financial attacks in my career. I've gone through more than a few.
Yeah, I imagine.
I've been sued many times.
Yeah.
Most of the time I end up making money, which is really rad. I've been sued 3 times by people I've never met. I got sued in a state I've never traveled to by someone I've never met because I bought equipment from a guy that they wanted to sue, and they found out that I bought the equipment.
So they sued you.
So they named me. But what they didn't know was I was the only one who could actually solve their problem.
Wow.
So once after 6 months of being in a suit, and people need to understand these things take a long time, to be wrongfully accused and not have your heart get twisted is really a superpower.
That's really is true.
Because if you can stay soft, you can unlock incredible, I think, trust with the Lord. And so both times this has happened to me. What I ended up doing is just staying soft, and you're being wrongfully accused. You're spending lots of money to defend yourself. It doesn't always end like this, by the way, for me, but I ended up getting face to face with these billionaires about 6-9 months into the process against all the other,
who were suing you?
Yeah. Well, they were suing the architect who I'd never met, who was suing the builder. And then they turn around and sue everybody. This is how development goes. Yeah. And so I got in front of him on a Zoom and just said, hey, you don't know me. I don't know you. Half the people have allowed us out of the suit. Half the people won't. We have nothing to do with it. But let me tell you, I hear you. I see how you've been wronged. And even though I wasn't around to be part of that action, I see where you are, and I have a solution for you. You hire me for $2 million to come fix your problem. The suit was for $12 million. And they said, I said, look, it's not even about the money because they're billionaires. I said, it's every day you walk out in your home and you try to entertain, and your $3 million window package is failing. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I said, I can fix it in 6 months. From today, you will have your life back, because it's like a 10-year-old problem. So we ended up contracting our most profitable project ever. And And, so that's the second time.
Solve their problem.
Yeah.
Also, it was a win-win.
But it took 6 months of being wrongfully accused, staying patient, staying soft, looking for solutions, seeking their best interests, waiting for the opportunity to actually have a conversation, paying lawyers' fees, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that, I'm sure you have this happen too. A lot of young people come and they're like, I want to start a business. And, they got the stars in the eyes. And I'm like, ooh, business will knock the stars out of your eyes really quickly. Mm-hmm. Same with ministry, to be honest. Obviously, I think business is a ministry. But I mean, when you're in vocational ministry, and you're like, I love people, and I just love Jesus, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, I remember how simple it was just to love Jesus. And then when it's a whole different thing when your career is based around helping people love Jesus and helping people who are going through hard times. And it's challenging. Working with people is challenging.
I remember as a kid reading the Bible, and I would see the word shrewd in scripture.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I don't understand that, because the Jesus I know is the nicest guy I've ever met. He hugs everybody. And as I remember specifically, I met my wife in youth ministry, worked for a camp. Then we ended up as part of a church. We were in leadership. People are getting saved in our house. It was all college driven around Cal Poly.
Very similar.
So we had all these home groups in our home, like 5 nights a week. We actually lived with another couple, and it was like a hostel, because we had that couple each ran a home group. We ran a home group. So 5 nights a week, our house was a home group. The neighbors probably thought we were just the weirdest people ever.
You were probably.
Yeah, probably. Then I moved into my first career job after doing work, and I put on a tie. And I was in that environment as a 23-year-old, and I realized no one in this environment can receive the message that I'm giving to the college kids. They have a whole different set of life experience, and everything we do in that ministry means nothing to them as far as the format. Yeah. And I said, Lord, teach me how to reach this man. And that begun a long journey of having to let go of like all these other things. But the word that kept getting brought up over and over was shrewd, how to run with men, speak to their hearts, inspire them, but also have an incredible defense mechanism, a filter,
Oh, it's incredible. You've done an incredible job building a great business in our community. How many employees do you have now?
Right now in Shasta County, I think we're only 25, but our plan is to be 200 in about 2 years' time. So we're kind of running like the prototyping facility right now. So we produce a house a week, and
that's amazing.
And it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun, and then hopefully we'll be up to 4 a day.
Wow.
In the big facility.
Henry Ford. I'm going to start calling you Henry Ford. But Henry Ford of the building industry.
Yeah. And what we're really dreaming for is an economic transfer, because everywhere we put these projects in the Bay or LA, that money from that development is now being transferred through Shasta County. 80% of that project will move financially through Shasta County and then ignite Shasta County. So we're basically, what the Lord's highlighting is the solution to the state's problem is city partnerships. So San Francisco their problem is our opportunity in Redding.
Yep.
And LA's problem is our opportunity in Redding, if we're willing to see it that way.
I was just sharing yesterday, I did a wealth class actually for our staff, for 200 of our staff. Actually, 150 of them showed. And one of the points that I make is that difference between wealth and poverty is that wealthy people see a problem as an opportunity, and poor people see an opportunity as a problem. And I said to them, one of the things that we do to create wealth in our lives, not just financial wealth, of course, but this is one, is that we find a need, a true need, something that people truly need, and we find a way to fill it in a way that no one's ever seen before. Mm-hmm. Like we take an ordinary thing and do it in an extraordinary way, and make sure the Lord's in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. That's how you become so successful.
And all these prayers about and these truths about God's resources being unlocked, one thing I've become aware of in the last few years is how much resource there is.
Yeah.
Even from what I can see, which I know is like a fraction.
Yeah.
And the conduit to unlocking it has been trust.
Yeah.
Because the people holding those resources, they're entrusted by God to only release them to people who can handle them. And so it's one thing to pray, God, pour out your resources, but it's another thing to say, like, which I pray with my team, my senior team, who do we need to become to be the people who could be trusted with that? What would it take? You know, and unfortunately for me, it's taken a lot of pain.
It's really true. Like all business is based on trust. I said yesterday is one of my other examples is, hey, how many of you can make a better hamburger than McDonald's? And 150 people raised their hand. They said, how come you're not a billionaire? Because McDonald's isn't selling hamburgers. Mm-hmm. They're selling trust, and they sell trust through systematizing. So you get the same hamburger every day, on any continent, done by any group of people, because they figured out a way to do what they said they would do day in and day out. You go to McDonald's because you know that you're going to get the same burger every day. And that consistency is trust. And if you can't build trust, you don't have a business. Hey, so Dan, what does it mean to be a cultural catalyst?
To be a cultural catalyst, I think it means that you not only seek the well-being of other people, but you seek to create things that empower people. So if you're creating anything that empowers people, I think you're getting it done. So that could be small scale, large scale, but to create something that empowers people, it means you have to look at what they need and then work backwards and say, how do I structure value that actually delivers to them what they need? So that could be a product, or it could be the work environment you create. So, you know, for us, that looks right now, it looks like, the way that we lead our staff, you know, so that's all about leadership. Like our big focus right now is leadership development.
Yeah. You're leading your staff. You're also leading your community.
Yeah.
Secondarily, right? You're leading your community. As you lead your staff, you're making an impact on this community.
Yeah.
And you're also financially benefiting our community.
Right. So there's layers. I mean, I've created strategies that create financial transfers and things like that for all of it. But at the end of the day, it's like, if I can lead that man into being a better father and a better leader of his family, and that means financial success for him and those sorts of things, I think we're accomplishing it. But definitely where we're going, we're trying to go even strategically much wider than that. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. Hey,
Dan, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing for Shasta County. Thank you for what you're doing for Redding. Sometime we have to come back and have a conversation about fatherhood, because I watched you father your family through a really tough time. And probably the reason I most wanted to have you on here, because I so respect the fact that you laid down your life for your son, and thank God you got him back, because you didn't know at the time if that was going to be the outcome. And you said to the rest of everything else, like, okay, this was only important in light of my son's health. Right. If my son's not healthy, these other things aren't important to me.
That's right.
And so thank you so much. Hey, you know, you may be listening to Dan and saying, you know, I'm a business person, or I have a lot of responsibility and I have these problems going on. And you look around at people who are, quote, wealthy, and you think they live in some kind of an isolated castle. And what you're hearing about today is a man who loves his family, a man who loves his community, loves his city, loves God, who's doing great things. And you're seeing the sacrifice it takes to actually be successful in God isn't how much money you make. It's how well you love God and how well you love people. Yeah. I hope that's what you heard today. Dan, thanks so much for being on. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless your finances. And I pray that you would actually look to blessing your city. See you next week.